NFL players voted Montez Sweat as a top 100 player in the league. But Chicago Bears fans don't always treat him that way. We'll explore why on today's Locked On Bears podcast.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. On the show today, we're going to look at Montez Sweat's resume as a top 100 player in the NFL, as voted by the players in the NFL, and why there seems to be a disconnect there sometimes between how Bears fans view him and how clearly the rest of the league views him. Bears fans don't think of him as a elite, top-flight defensive end, and not that ranking 91st out of 100 means he's a future Hall of Fame player, but there clearly seems to be a different perception locally that's somehow lower. Usually we think of the fan base going to be higher on your own players than the national perspective, but it seems like Sweat is more beloved nationally than he is locally in Chicago. So we'll take a look at what some of the causes are behind that, how he should rank among edge rushers in the NFL, and then we'll have to take a look at what other Bears either belong in the top 100 right now or will belong in the top 100 after this upcoming season. I do want to thank you for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. And I just get the feeling that Bears fans don't appreciate Montez Sweat the way that this top 100 ranking would be. I mean, when they were starting to put out the top 100 rankings, I saw Bears fans on social media talking about which Bears players they thought might be in this list. And Montez Sweat was not one of them. Maybe he's in the fringe of the conversation for some Bears fans, but I don't think Bears fans collectively see Montez Sweat as a top 100 player in the league. It's why we spend so much of the offseason talking about trading for Max Crosby, or signing Trey Hendrickson, or trading for Myles Garrett, or trading for TJ Watt, trading for a pass rusher. And the idea in a lot of those conversations is that, like, the Bears need, supposedly, that true number one edge rusher. That, like, Montez Sweat is a really good, like, number two edge rusher, but they need that, like, alpha take over the game edge rusher to truly be that difference maker. And then Sweat can be a really good complement to one of those players. And of course, adding Crosby or Hendrickson or whoever would be great. Like, no one's here to say that, no, like, Sweat's not better than any of those players, and we'll see that play out in the top 100 list here. But I think there's something to be said about, hey, like, Sweat is a really good player. And I think at this point, underappreciated by Chicago Bears fans for what he does contribute. And I wanted to dig in a little bit deeper into why. I think what it primarily comes down to, from my view, is a slight disconnect between his salary and his sack production. And this idea that he is one of the highest paid edge rushers in the NFL, depending on how you slice it. But over his career, he's hit double-digit sacks twice. And had 10 sacks this past season, 5.5 the year before that, and then 12.5 his first year when he came to Chicago at the midpoint. But otherwise, he's been a 7, 8, 9 sack type of player. And we don't think of, as a shorthand, sacks, a 7, 8, 9 sack guy is not necessarily like what we think of as a dominant edge rusher who's a top 100 player in the NFL. We think of that as a very good edge rusher who makes important plays, but isn't necessarily breaking games, isn't taking over and dominating at the biggest and most important moments. And maybe Montez Sweat doesn't do that exactly, but he has been a Pro Bowl edge rusher before and is more valuable as a defensive end than just what his sacks present you. Like, we've talked a number of times on this podcast about how sacks are not a very strong overall measurement of a defensive end or edge rusher's impact on the game. If you think about, even the best players in the NFL will have 15 to 20 sacks in a season, but they might play or 800 snaps. Like that means those sacks represented 2.5% of the total plays that they were on the field. If you had even like 20 sacks in 800 snaps, which would be a hugely great season, that's 2.5% or less of your total snaps over the course of a season result in sacks. So that tells us what a player did really well on 2% of their plays. It doesn't tell us what they did on the other 97 plus % of their plays. And so like it can be a useful shorthand to look at the highest impact plays a player had, but other players like Montez Sweat do a lot on the other 97% of their plays that don't get captured in the sack number. And therefore it's harder for us to see a quick and easy measurement of how good he is, because there's not a number that you can point to. Say he had this many stat. There's not a stat say he had 20 of this and that means he's a good player. We kind of have to piece together an amalgamation of stats that try and paint a picture of where Montez Sweat is. We talked about this a little bit a couple weeks ago on the podcast when Ben Johnson had a press conference and was asked about Montez Sweat and said he thought Montez Sweat was coming off of the best season of his career in 2025. That is, despite it not being his best ever sack season, but he was just really good in a bunch of different categories. Montez Sweat had second most sacks of any season with 10. He had 13 tackles for loss last season. That was the third most of his career. His rate of pressure on the opposing quarterback was just under 12%. That was the third best rate of his career. He had 4 batted passes, which was the second most he's had in a season in his career. And PFF tracks run stops, like tackles for a stop in the running game. He had 23, which was the most in his career so far. So it was an all-around very good season, but it's hard for us to just quickly glance at sacks, tackle for loss, pressure rate, batted passes, run stops, and then measure that up against all the other pass rushers in the NFL, right? Like we all know Myles Garrett led the NFL in sacks this season, was over 20, but like no one outside of Cleveland, or I guess now Los Angeles, could tell us how many tackles for loss Myles Garrett had, what his pressure rate was last season, how many run stops he had. Like these aren't like quick and easy numbers for us to know how one player did versus another. Like we know Myles Garrett's also very good against the run, so we assume he did well, but like how do you rank, how do you know how much better one defensive end is than the other? And so I think you sort of combine that with Montez Sweat's salary, where maybe the sack numbers are lower, but a lot of, or not as special, but a lot of the other stuff he does isn't as measured as well. But you put that against a salary cap hit of $25 million this season. He is the single most expensive player on the Bears roster this year. And that carries a certain amount of weight and a certain amount of expectations. And when you look at, like, depending on how you want to split salary numbers, if you look at just salary cap hit, like amount of money team is paying a player for just the 2026 season, Montez Sweat will be the third most expensive edge rusher in football. TJ Watt will cost the Steelers $42 million this year. Max Crosby will cost the Raiders $36 million this year. Then Montez Sweat is third at $25 million. His cap hit this season is higher than Josh Hines-Allen's in Jacksonville, Nick Bosa in San Francisco, Micah Parsons in Green Bay, Boye Mafe in Cincinnati, Daniel Hunter in Houston, Trey Hendrickson in Baltimore, et cetera, despite many of those pass rushers I named there consistently producing more sacks than Montez Sweat. And so I think there's this perception that, like, I think Bears fans properly view that, hey, Montez Sweat's a good player. You're not seeing Bears fans saying he sucks or he's bad or get rid of him. It's that he's a good player, but maybe is he not worth his salary at $25 million this season? Like, is 10 sacks worth being the most expensive player on your roster this year? I think that's where he gets underrated in terms of his value to the team. Like, Bears fans acknowledge he's good, but is he worth the full dollar price of Montez Sweat? That's where I think Bears fans come in a little bit lower than the national perspective that just looks at, especially the top 100 players, are not looking at his contract. They're just saying, how good is he as a defensive lineman? How hard is he for offensive linemen to block? He is a pain in the keister, and that's what gets him up to number 91 on the NFL Top 100 list this season, as voted by other players around the NFL. They have a little video clip of it on the NFL social media channel where I think it's the offensive lineman Rosengarten from the Ravens talks about how Montez Sweat plays like a mummy because his arms are always out. He's really hard to block when he's got those long arms. And, he ran a 4.4 at the 40-yard dash and just kind of a freak athlete with great length, strength, and technique and intelligence. Like, Montez Sweat's a player who is better than the sum of his parts. It's better than the stats tell you. He just does the dirty things, the run defense, the technique, the taking on double teams better than we give him credit for, because we don't have great ways to measure all the ways that Montez Sweat is very, very good. And so I do want to try and do a better job of, like, okay, if maybe Montez Sweat is better than Bears fans give him credit for, like, where does he fit among the top NFL edge rushers? He's a top 100 overall player, but where does he belong among, because he's not Max Crosby, Trey Hendrickson, but then where is he in that hierarchy? We'll explore. We're not going to rank them all in order, but we'll explore kind of what category of player he belongs with next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Workplace chaos can show up fast, but that's where Indeed Sponsored Jobs comes in. Because Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach candidates who actually fit what you're looking for based on skills, experience, and location. Finding the right person can make all the difference, whether it's building a business or building a winning team. We saw the difference Montez Sweat made when the Bears added him at the trade deadline a couple of seasons ago, and it's been a cornerstone edge rusher for the Bears ever since. So if you're looking for your organization's version of Montez Sweat, spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Thanks again for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. If you'd like to get access to an ad-free audio feed of Locked On Bears and skip the ad reads and get right back into the action, then you need to check out the new Locked On Bears Everydayers Club. It's also going to get you into an exclusive Locked On Bears listener group chat in the Everydayers Club Discord server. If you want to check it out, the website to go to is lockedonbears.supercast.com, and you can always find that link in the show notes or description wherever it is that you tune into the Locked On Bears podcast. So Montez Sweat is a top 100 player in the NFL, a little better than Bears fans tend to give him credit for. But we don't want to overrate him and say, oh no, actually he's an elite, game-changing, dominating pass rusher. Like, he's somewhere below that. But he's not a bad player by any means. He's a very good player, maybe even a great player. So where does that put him then among NFL defensive ends, like, around the NFL? And I think it's hard to, give an exact ranking. I don't want to go 1 through 20 and rank the edge rushers in order. But I think one easy way to look at this, as the NFL's top 100 keeps trickling out slowly, we're only getting a few at a time through August. So these are still going to keep coming out. We're not going to see literally where all the other NFL players ranked him in the top 100, but we can look back at last year's top 100 and get a better sense of maybe where these categories of players are. I should mention, on this year's top 100, they ranked New Orleans Saints defensive end Cameron Jordan at number 100. So Montez Sweat ranks better than Cam Jordan. For those that were interested in signing him as a free agent, and don't get me wrong, I would have signed Cam Jordan as a free agent as well, but the point being, Sweat is viewed as better than him as a starting point, so we have that. But if you look back at last year's top 100 players, there were 15 edge rushers in the top 100. I'm going to briefly read them in order from bottom to top. So Josh Sweat of the Cardinals, Andrew Van Ginkel of the Vikings, Rashawn Gary of the Packers, Khalil Mack of the Chargers, Josh Allen Hines of the Jaguars, Nick Bosa of the 49ers, Aiden Hutchinson of the Lions, Will Anderson of the Texans, Nick Bonito of the Broncos, Micah Parsons of the Cowboys / Green Bay Packers, Daniil Hunter of the Texans, Max Crosby, of course, of the Raiders, Trey Hendrickson of the Bengals at the time, now the Ravens, TJ Watt of the Steelers, and then Myles Garrett was the number one edge rusher this past top 100 list as a member of the Cleveland Browns. And so at a very minimum, a year ago, Montez Sweat was ranked no better than 16th if there were 15 guys on the list and Montez Sweat didn't make the list. And that might have been fair because Montez Sweat was coming off of a season in 2024, right? We have to go back 2 years because you're ranking the previous year, where he had only 5.5 sacks. Like, he had a down year in Matt Eberflus's last year. 5.5 sacks is not going to get you into the top 100 list. I believe that put him at a rank of 60th in the NFL in sacks that season. But now we go into 2025, Montez Sweat has 10 sacks, and that put him tied for 15th in sacks in the NFL. And again, we just spent a bunch of time talking about how sacks is not a great measurement of how good edge rushers are, because it captures one important aspect of their game, but not the full picture of their game. But I think we can start to piece together that if 15 guys made the top 100 last year, and now he is in the top 100 this year, and he ranked 15th in sacks-ish, then he can reasonably be considered somewhere around the 15th best edge rusher in football, like 14, 15, plus or minus a couple of spots in there. Like, that feels very fair to me as a place of like, hey, that's a really good player. He's in the better half of starting edge rushers in the NFL. I mean, every team has 2 starting edge rushers, so really, like, top 32 is the better half of starting edge rushers. But, like, you know, out of all the number, if every team has one number one edge rusher, 32 of them, he's in the upper half of number one edge rushers in the NFL. That feels like a very complimentary position for Montez Sweat, and something that I think is reasonable to sit here and give him credit for at this point today. And I think if we look at his salary in a slightly different vein, that also aligns very nicely, because we talked earlier how, in terms of salary cap hit this season, 2026, the Bears are paying him $25 million. That's the third most money going to any defensive end just for this season. That is true. He is, by that measurement, getting the third most money this year of any edge rusher in football. But as you may know, some prominent edge rushers recently got big contracts. Micah Parsons got a big contract. Danielle Hunter got a big contract. Aiden Hutchinson got a big contract. Trey Hendrickson got a big contract. I don't know if Crosby's contract went up, but a bunch of these guys got big contracts that average really big numbers per season. Some of these guys are getting as much as $50 million per year, I think, is the most expensive edge rusher contract right now. Will Anderson from the Texans is getting $50 million per year. But this year, he's only getting $13 million because they backloaded a bunch of that money in his contract and kind of pushed that all out into the future. And so he's making less than Montez Sweat this year, but his contract pays him an average per year a lot more than Montez Sweat. And you look at every edge rusher's average salary, so basically the contract they signed, total number of dollars divided by years, so per year average salary, Montez Sweat ranks way, way down. I had counted and I wrote down the number, and there we go, 16th in average annual value. There are 15 edge rushers in the NFL whose contracts average out more money per season. And so if Montez Sweat was tied for 15th in sacks and his contract pays him the 16th most amount of money per year, that kind of lines up nicely. Plus, again, like on the top 100 list, there are probably about 14 or so edge rushers ahead of him. Like, it kind of feels like there's a really nice marriage of, okay, the money is more or less matching the production, which is more or less matching where he ranks in the top 100 list. Like, I think we've kind of found where Montez Sweat fits. Like, he's not a top 5 edge rusher in the NFL. He's not a top 10 edge rusher in the NFL. He's probably getting close to that 10 number. You know, like, there's like some people who are paid more than him include like Travon Walker of the Jaguars, who he's probably better than at this point in the process. And we'll see, like, as, you know, guys like TJ Watt and Nick Bosa and others continue to age and deal with injuries. Like, not that Sweat's going to be instantly better than them, but right, like the point being is like he can play his way up here a little bit, and maybe Sweat's right where he needs to be. Maybe we don't need to wring our hands and concentrate about, oh, is he good enough? Is he not good enough? Maybe he's getting exactly what he's worth and giving the Bears exactly what they're paying for. And sure, we would all love to have a top 10, top 5 edge rusher on this defensive line, but like he ain't the problem. He's the best player on the Chicago Bears defensive line and one of the best players on the Chicago Bears defense, period. If not, maybe the best player on the Chicago Bears defense, period. Because he may be I think he will be the only Chicago Bears player under contract on defense on this top 100 list. But we'll explore who belongs in that conversation for this year and who might jump into that conversation for next year. Next on Locked On Bears. Montez Sweat might have been a slight surprise hitting the list at number 91 in the top 100 players of 2026. And these guys are all coming out a couple of them each day. And so depending on when you listen to this, maybe there will already have been another Bear that shows up on the list that I don't know about this. But so far, as we get into the 80s and such, Montez Sweat is the only Chicago Bear on the top 100 list thus far. And it makes me wonder about, well, who else might be in the top 100 list from the Chicago Bears? Because a year ago, this time last year, when they were putting out the previous year's top 100 list, do you know how many Chicago Bears made that list? You might be sitting at home going, well, of course, Joe Thuney made the list, so that's one. And then would anybody else have made the list? I don't know, probably only one, right? 0. Joe Thuney did not make the list last year. It seemed like a massive snub. I think we talked about it at the time of like, how the heck does maybe the best guard in football not make the top 100 list? Well, we've already seen multiple centers make this year's top 100 list. So Joe Thuney has to be on here somewhere, right? He won the NFL's first ever Protector of the Year award. Like, he won the award for being the best offensive lineman in football. He was first team All-Pro again, made the Pro Bowl for the 4th straight season. It is impossible for Joe Thuney to be voted best offensive lineman in football and then not make the top 100 list while other offensive linemen are on the top 100 list. You can't be the best offensive lineman in football, but then ranked lower than other offensive linemen on this list. Like, he will be on this list somewhere. But he's the only current Chicago Bear I am confident will show up in the top 100. I think Darnell Wright has a strong case to be made for being a top 100 player. I think he has started playing like that caliber of an offensive tackle this season, but he did not make the Pro Bowl this year. I think he got some second team All-Pro votes, or did he end up on the second team All-Pro? I can't remember I think he just got votes, but he wasn't actually named to the team. So like, he's starting to get more recognition, but like, you know, I would think if he was going to sneak into this list, it would be right at the bottom here. And if he's not on that already, I'm not sure Darnell Wright's going to make it in there, right? Because it's too early for Colston Loveland. You know, a half season of great play last year is not going to get him to be a top 100 player yet. Obviously, you know, Luther Burden, Rome Odunze was hurt. Caleb doesn't get that kind of national respect, you know, with the 32nd ranked completion percentage and yada, yada. I don't expect Caleb Williams, despite being on the Madden cover, I don't expect him to be a top 100 player. I guess it wouldn't stun me because of all the fourth quarter comebacks and electric plays he made. I could make a case for him as a top 100 player. I'm just not sure that the perception of him nationally is yet, but we'll see. You know, the NFL teased that video where Micah Parsons talked about Iceman, and people thought he was saying that Caleb Williams was the best player in the NFL. That's not the case, but Caleb might sneak into this list. I think Jalen Johnson, when he is healthy, is a top 100 caliber player, but he was not healthy last season, so he's not making the list. The only other bear that might have a shot at this is Kevin Byard, having played for the Chicago Bears last season, leading the NFL with 7 interceptions, making the Pro Bowl, and being first team All-Pro. I could see Kevin Byard making the top 100 list, even though, you know, he's a New England Patriot now, but It was for the play he did with the Chicago Bears. So if you want to count that, you can. I don't know how you want to count it, but he would kind of belong in this list for this year. Now, next year, you can really see this opening up. That if Darnell Wright has another big season, he should make that jump onto the top 100 list, as the Bears also presumably soon here give him a contract extension that make him one of the highest paid offensive tackles in football. Wright can jump on this list. Joe Thuney should be on the list again next season, as long as he's playing the same way Joe Thuney always plays. If Caleb takes that next step forward in his career and completes even 63% of his passes and 4,000 yards, he will be on the top 100 list next year for sure. If Jalen Johnson stays healthy and gets back to playing at the Pro Bowl level we've seen him play, I think he has a path to being a top 100 player on this list. And we already mentioned Colston Loveland. Like if he's a 1,000-yard tight end or close to it this season, like if he has a full season of breakout Colston Loveland, I think he's going to play his way as a top 100 player in the NFL. And then, I don't know, do we leave open the possibility of like Rome Odunze or Luther Burden? Like if one of them has a huge year and breaks 1,200 yards, could they be in the conversation? Certainly not both aren't going to make the list, but if one kind of outshines the other, you could kind of see a path there. And then I just wonder about Kobe Bryant in this Bears defense. I'm not ready to put money on him making that astronomical of a leap, but I do think we've got a really nice combination of like scheme, fit, and role for him on this defense. Like he was never a Pro Bowl player in Seattle. He had 4 interceptions this past season. Like he's a playmaker, but like never gets that like big time national recognition. But you can't help but feel like, well, Byard just had 7 interceptions in this defense and was a big time playmaker. And now you take a younger, faster, more dynamic player in Kobe Bryant and plug him into that spot that in theory you could see Kobe Bryant elevate a little bit more. He's on the fringe of this conversation. I was like dark horse, never say never. Maybe he starts to get in this conversation. That's kind of where I would leave him in this category. Nobody else really jumps out at me. I mean, maybe Devin Bush if he has a monster season, but he's kind of even another step below where like Kobe Bryant is in that regard. If Kyler Gordon were ever healthy, I think someday he has that potential within him, but he's still got a ways to go there. Like it's kind of hard to see. I mean, Jonah Jackson, I don't think he's quite that caliber of guard. Really good player. Like you could still be a really good player and not make the top 100 list, as evidenced by literally every single Bears player that didn't make the list last year. So it is not by any means a foolproof, holistic measurement of how good a player is, but it is a measurement of how a player is perceived by their opponents across the NFL. And for that, I think it has some real value. Just as even if you want to, boil it down to a popularity contest, the Bears have never been winning a lot of popularity contests in my lifetime, outside of Chicago. I mean, I guess, like the Brian Urlachers and Peanut Tillmans of the world and Briggs maybe had that kind of respect. And like Brandon Marshall, there were some guys with some, superstar abilities there. I guess Julius Peppers, but rarely do you see a Bears team with a bunch of guys that like everyone looks around the NFL and goes like, man, that Montez Sweat is a butt kicker. Someone I hate having to go up against week in and week out. Or, oh man, I'm dreading having to cover Colston Loveland over the middle of the field. Like players that can give opposing coordinators and position coaches trouble sleeping ahead of their game. Like the potential is there for a bunch of Bears players to step into and grow into those opportunities this season. And that's what's going to be so exciting to watch week in and week out. I hope you will watch along with us here on the Locked On Bears podcast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today. Come on back tomorrow as we're going to compare where the Bears supporting cast around Caleb Williams compares to the rest of the NFL, but more importantly, the rest of the NFC North. There was an ESPN article last week that ranked every team's weapons in terms of running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. I think they ranked the Bears way too low, but specifically too low compared to their NFC North rivals here. So we'll kind of piece through where the Bears belong in that hierarchy of their weapons. And then I'd like to do the same thing for the defense as well, like what the defense needs to do to catch up, not so much where they rank, because we know the Bears defense wasn't great last season. But what we need to see from this Bears defense to kind of catch up to the rest of the NFC North and get to the level they need to be to help this Bears offense shoulder so much of that load. So that's coming up tomorrow and Wednesday this week on the podcast. We're down to 3 days a week during this slow part of the calendar here, but in a couple weeks, once we get ramping up for training camp, we'll be back to 5 days a week as the rookies report and then the full team reports, and we'll be full blow training camp through next NFL draft and beyond, 5 days a week here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So coming back tomorrow, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.